Hi everyone, my name is Zach Diaz. I am a PhD student at the University of Bristol. I am also a hip-hop producer and have released several instrumental projects under the Beat Supply label based in Manchester. So my main project revolves around looking at hip-hop producer Dilla and his profound, I would say, impact that he has had on hip-hop production over the past 10 to 15 years. Kind of after his death. But today I'm going to be talking about how we sort of academically and non-academically, fellow musicians, fans, whoever, kind of interpret his sort of what a lot of people call like hybrid swing, or the sort of drunk feel, the Dilla groove, whatever you want to call it, as well as sort of basically ideas I have within my project going forward for like how I think that how that kind of rhythmic feel should maybe be interpreted, other ways of looking at it. But within a like broader sort of project where that fits in is looking at the musical characteristics of Dilla himself, found within his discography, and then also looking at how those characteristics have sort of influenced modern hip-hop production, mainly instrumental hip-hop production, in the past decade or so. So yeah, thanks again to IASPM and to everyone for this opportunity, and I hope you enjoy. Whether it's called wonky, drunk, or simply a Dilla groove, Dilla's innovations and approaches to unquantized drum programming and production are some of the most influential and intricate in the world of hip-hop beatmaking. By analyzing his compositional process through his production on selected tracks Untitled and To You For You in Slum Village's Fantastic Volume 2, I will be exploring how Dilla implemented and expanded on his approaches to unquantized production and sequencing, as well as how these approaches have heavily influenced works of current hip-hop production. From a plethora of experimental beatmakers from the Los Angeles beat scene to the countless producers posting lo-fi instrumental hip-hop beats in online spaces, I will also be discussing Dilla's influence in these spaces and how his sonic aesthetics from his production on Fantastic Volume 2 have shaped the current sound and culture of hip-hop production and beatmaking, looking at specific tracks by current Los Angeles-based hip-hop producers such as Diaz and Flying Lotus, as well as highlighting discussions on Dilla's production techniques occurring in several online spaces. Though Dilla is most often credited with the implementation of unquantized programmed drum patterns on drum machines and samplers, he is certainly not the first in hip-hop to experiment with or resist the rhythmically strict or stiff patterns that are usually found within a sizable amount of sequence and sample drum production in popular music. Hip-hop producers such as the RZA would frequently experiment with uneven looping either intentionally or unintentionally in early Wu-Tang Clan productions, and R&B producers Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis would frequently perform drum patterns live on their own productions to give a more human feel to their recordings. Dilla, however, certainly popularized and expanded upon this desire for more human-feeling drum patterns, which began with early experimentations as a teenager with the EMU SP12 sampler, which he acquired from mentor and guitarist Amp Fiddler in the early 1990s. Dilla's unique style of drum programming eventually caught the attention of Los Angeles rap group The Pharcyde, which hired Dilla to produce several tracks for their 1995 sophomore album Lab Cap in California. Upon hearing these unorthodox drum grooves, Questlove states in his book Mo Meta Blues, Dilla was just going crazy on the kick pattern. At that moment, I had the same reaction I do to anything truly radical in hip-hop. I was paralyzed, uncertain how to feel. Usually, if I go over the top with my approval for an album or a band, it turns out to be a solid achievement. But like I said, if I'm brought up short by a piece of artwork, if I'm conflicted, confounded, and made uncomfortable, 9 times out of 10, that thing will change the course of history. Throughout the mid to late 90s, Dilla continued to produce in this style, making beats for prominent hip-hop artists such as Busta Rhymes, De La Soul, and A Tribe Called Quest. During this time, he also continued to work with Detroit rap group Slum Village, who would release their debut mixtape Fantastic Volume 1 in 1997. After the mixtape's massive popularity in underground scenes across the US as well as abroad, Slum Village went on to release Fantastic Volume 2, a reworking of many of the original tracks from Volume 1, as well as several new songs, as well as featured artists such as Pete Rock, Q-Tip, and D'Angelo. This album of some of Slum Village's most popular tracks features some of J Dilla's most prominent production characteristics, featuring unquantized drums throughout every track. The 10th track on the album, untitled Fantastic, features a quintessential J Dilla drum pattern, with a rhythmically sparse Rhodes piano and sustained string note remaining fairly stagnant while the drum groove keeps the track in motion. This drum pattern stays constant throughout the entirety of Untitled, until the second section of the track, Fantastic, enters later, providing a solid groove for all three members of Slum Village to rap over. Due to the importance of the drum pattern as a basis for the unquantized groove found in Untitled, the track contains what I call a single level of unquantization, as only the drums provide any kind of prominent swing or hybrid swing pattern.
Yo, you owe it to me, give up cash about the sleeve. See, I'ma show you all how to MC. See, I can rock and roll, well, how I read, I rock, well, I be one of the soldiers of the team. See, y'all niggas is dope fiends, hoping for a dream. Intervene like a case of gangrene. Gain the green and exit the scene with a fine chick who can fill up a pair of jeans. See, I'm doing this shit for Magnet.
The following diagrams compare a typical quantized backbeat drum pattern created in Ableton Live 9 to a transcription of the unquantized drum pattern found in Untitled. Notice how, in comparison to the quantized pattern, the kick drum and hi-hat occurs slightly after the upbeats of beats 1 and 3, while the snare hits occur slightly before beats 2 and 4. Also notice how an added clap and hard stick sound is added to the backbeat, further emphasizing the weak beats of the drum pattern. The 16th track off of Fantastic Volume 2, titled To You For You, experiments even further with unquantized patterns, with almost every aspect of the production containing some kind of hybrid swung groove. In this case, the entire production was recorded live on a digital audio tape, with Kareem Riggins on drums and J Dilla performing and replaying a guitar sample of D'Angelo's Jones and My Bones on his MPC, with bass line and added synth textures overdubbed in later takes. The fact that this was recorded live is apparent in the fact that the overall tempo of the track fluctuates between 93 and 95 beats per minute, showing that the recording most likely revolved around the groove of the drum pattern as opposed to playing straight to a click track or metronome. Within this production, the backbeats are the most emphasized and accented aspect of the instrumental, with the bass line avoiding beats 2 and 4 in order for the snare and clap sounds to come out in mix. The sheet music transcription shown shows how the backbeats are emphasized in this production, with beats 2 and 4 highlighted. Because of the multi-level unquantized nature of this production, this makes this track difficult to accurately transcribe rhythmically. With the sheet music transcription, we find that the rhythms portrayed to be rather reductive, as certain aspects like the drums appear to be a fairly simple rudimentary backbeat, and avoiding the micro-rhythmic complexities found in Kareem Riggins' performance. With the MIDI transcription, however, we find the unquantized nature of the beat to only be an approximation, with the track having to be looked at in separated sections as the subtle fluctuations in tempo makes it difficult to accurately portray in a digital audio workstation. The MIDI transcription shown is a 4-measure excerpt of around 40 seconds into the track and shows only the rhythmic aspects transcribed in the Drum Rack plugin of Ableton Live 9. As opposed to looking at attempts to accurately transcribe the specific amounts of unquantization in this production, I believe it's important to discuss the approaches in which this hybrid swing is performed. Although I believe there is value in more strict analysis of distilling and transcribing rhythmic variations found both in production and lyrical flows, such as Martin Connor's transcriptions and Mitch Orner's diagrams in his book on flow, as well as Sean Peterson's audio transcriptions of several Dilla productions and his PhD dissertation on the Soulquarians. In this case, with unquantized rhythmic patterns, I believe it is more important to discuss more general approaches to interpreting these patterns, as well as how these patterns have been emulated, interpreted, and discussed by other producers and fans. One way of interpreting this hybrid swing pattern is by comparing it to jazz theorist Steve Larson's definition of swing in jazz. In this definition, he states that a swing pattern is the concept of striking a balance between two opposing forces of intensity, with these two forces being the intensity and buildup of the upbeat with the relaxation of descending downbeat. In Dilla's unquantized patterns, although this swing is much more subtle than the triplet swing patterns found in traditional jazz music, the concept and approach to intensity and relaxation is the same. The diagram shows this basic feel with the drum pattern of beats 1 and 2 underlaid, and although micro-rhythmic variations will occur especially in live recordings such as To You For You, the same approach occurs and repeats throughout. As stated previously, J Dilla's experimentation with unquantized rhythmic patterns have had a massive influence in the past decade since his death in 2006. Los Angeles-based producer Flying Lotus, Stephen Ellison, has been one of the forerunners of what is known as the Los Angeles beat scene, which features a community of hip-hop producers and beatmakers experimenting with innovative production techniques in their music. Flying Lotus's track Zodiac Shit off of his 2010 album Cosmogramma is a prime example of this, with the first half of the track featuring rhythmically sparse keyboard and string samples and heavily unquantized drums, similar to J Dilla's Untitled. This unquantization is taken to extremes, with the intensity points of each upbeat occurring significantly longer than the relaxation points. This aspect is especially apparent in the shaker rhythm of the drum pattern, which occurs somewhere between an eighth note triplet and string of 4 16th notes. One other notable example of Dilla's influence is in the music of fellow Los Angeles producer Diaz, whose music has not only gained popularity in the Los Angeles area, but throughout several online spaces as well, starting with MySpace and the Stones Throw and SP forums in the mid-2000s. In his track Fly Me to the Moon, off of his 2011 album Sound Palace, a heavy unquantized drum pattern is found accompanying a sample of Astrid Gilberto's 1965 rendition of the same name. With this unquantized drum pattern greatly contrasting the straight eighth note Latin pattern of the original sample, multiple microrhythmic discrepancies occur between the drums added by Diaz and the drums found in the original recording. Although this production technique has certainly been a significant factor in J Dilla's influence on contemporary hip-hop production, there are many other aspects of his creative processes that have been influential to hip-hop producers around the world. From aspiring beginners to seasoned professionals, producers on a variety of online spaces discuss, debate, and educate each other on the techniques and innovations J Dilla achieved throughout his career. These sources not only serve to highlight and praise Dilla's innovations post-mortem, but also learn from them in order to achieve similar sonic aesthetics in their own beats. Aspects like methods of micro-chopping samples, compression and vinyl simulation, and creating specific drum grooves and patterns frequently feature as topics of discussion on the SP Forum's website, a forum site specifically designed for producers who use Roland's SP series of samplers to discuss sampling and production techniques, with J Dilla almost always brought up as a prime example. Other sources, such as the Dilla Data website, provide information on all samples Dilla used throughout his career and production discography, providing fans, scholars, and producers with useful information on the origins of audio samples that were so crucial to Dilla's musical style and aesthetic. J Dilla's influence and musical presence can be found not only on forums and comments online, but in user-created playlists and beat tapes. In recent years, the instrumental subgenre of lo-fi hip-hop has gained massive popularity, with platforms such as YouTube and Spotify featuring playlists that reach millions of listens and followers on a monthly basis. The influence of Dilla's production style is apparent throughout much of the music featured on many of these playlists, with brief track lengths similar to that of track lengths on many of Dilla's beat tapes, approximately 1 to 2 minutes, heavy uses of compression and added vinyl or tape noise, and samples stemming mainly from classic jazz, soul, and R&B. In many cases, artists who curate and produce these playlists see the similarities in production between their own and Dilla's as a form of homage or tribute, although some producers and critics have criticized this subculture as exploiting Dilla's aura for both social and financial capital. Even major Grammy-winning producers such as Ninth Wonder have chimed in on this trend of lo-fi hip-hop, expressing that although he sees nothing wrong with this subculture being influenced by figures such as J Dilla, he is concerned that the subgenre itself might be a product of whitening the genre, with influential figures such as J Dilla being left out or removed from the culture. In relation to J Dilla's unquantized rhythms, a good portion of discussions in online spaces surrounding methods of achieving a similar rhythmic feel to one's own productions or compositions also tend to involve applying rhythmic patterns of various complexities, such as various unique subdivisions within 4/4 time, such as septuplets, quintuplets, and various methods of applying metric modulations, or combined compound and simple meters. Although the methods presented in these tutorials achieve a similar effect to J Dilla's rhythmic patterns, I believe they fail in understanding the purpose of creating an unquantized rhythmic pattern in order to achieve a more human feel in their productions. By adding extra layers of complexity and analysis, instead of teaching specific methods of practicing this groove using references from other productions, this method of attempting to subdivide and precisely transcribe unquantized grooves puts what is a musical diasporic concept deeply rooted in the African diaspora through a European diasporic lens. Referring to Michael Derrico's article in the Cambridge Companion to Hip Hop, where he discusses the production in the post-Golden Age era, I'd like to expand on this concept by looking at the past 14 years since J Dilla's death as a post-Dilla era. As I have discussed throughout this presentation, Dilla's musical influence saturates hip-hop production as well as production, composition, and other genres of popular music. Jazz scenes from London to New York look to Dilla with groups such as the Abstract Orchestra performing acoustic jazz arrangements of J Dilla beats. Dilla has also influenced music production beyond strictly hip-hop, with artists like Shlomo and Tora Imoy using specific production techniques such as the use of unquantized drum patterns and chopped sampling. But more specifically, Dilla's influence is at its most apparent in the world of instrumental hip-hop, with innovative artists in the Los Angeles beat scene like Mind Design and DiBiase carrying the torch for forward-thinking hip-hop beats that still maintain soulful qualities, as well as artists in lo-fi hip-hop scenes online emulating Dilla beats, saturated with tape hiss and receiving millions of listeners on music platforms like YouTube and Spotify. Years after Dilla's death, whatever direction hip-hop goes in, J Dilla would continue to have a monumental influence on its sound and form.
Don't cry. Alright, you sing it, and I'll show you how my voice would have made an unbelievable thing good. Oh, okay, Joy.